Okay, so we have Moazzam with us today, and oh boy, he has been all over the world. He's been incarcerated twice. Gitmo was one of them, right? Mm-hmm. Guantanamo Bay, they call Guantanamo Bay Gitmo. And I just watched a video of him where he is talking, well, not just talking to one of his former prison guards, but the guy is staying at his house. And the guy says, and I spotted this right away from watching what you've done online. The guy says, I felt like I was your friend as soon as I met you because of the way you carry yourself. You do radiate a peacefulness. Now, I do yoga and meditation and I see it in people in that community. But do you do anything like that? Or is this just a natural...
No, I don't do anything like that. I mean, it's my faith. My faith teaches me to be in a particular way. I think that's the aspect of it. My family would probably say I'm not that as calm as you may think.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's part of my nature.
One of his stories is going to include getting raided by over 150 police just at one time, which cost the taxpayers over £1 million. So today, just to give you a little summary, we're going to be getting into Bosnia, MI5, Afghanistan, Gitmo, meeting world leaders, empowering the Muslim community, visiting prisoners, Syria war, getting in trouble again, the media. It is endless. And Moazzam does have a book out as well. So he's doing so much activist work. I asked him earlier, what would he like people to support? We're going to put all the links in the description box to his socials, to the book, and to whatever comes out during this interview. So huge thank you for coming on then.
You're welcome, Shaun. It's my pleasure.
Where did you grow up and what was that like?
I was born and raised in Birmingham, though you may not know it from the accent.
I know.
I went as a child to a Jewish primary school, and I think that's one of the reasons why I don't have the accent. In my teens, I started to kind of connect with, because I was targeted by, especially in the 80s, but as many people were by neo-Nazis, racism, skinheads and stuff.
How old are you?
I'm 52 now.
Same age as me.
Okay.
So I know what you're talking about from that period of time. It was like punk rock, skinheads, all this stuff. Yeah.
So at school and afterwards, there were fights with skinheads. And we formed ourselves into a local gang called the Links, which was made up of young Irish kids, young Pakistani kids, young black kids. And our raison d'etre was to fight the skinheads. and we did. And we beat them up and we got beaten up. And that's how we rolled at that time.
Because, I mean, racism back then, there wasn't like this political correctness movement, was there? Growing up in a northern town, gay bashing, and you hear about, people running in restaurants owned by Pakistanis and the shops owned by the Pakistanis and just...
It was Paki bashing. That's what they call it. Paki bashing.
Yeah.
I got Paki bashed. But the difference was the Paki bashed back. And that's what it was. And that's what we were doing. We were happy. We were proud of that, of the fight back.
Yeah.
Neo-Nazis walking up and down Stratford Road in Sparkhill doing the Sikh Hal salute was normal.
Yeah.
We'd see it all the time. APL, the Anti-Paki League, you'd see it all the time, sometimes tattooed on somebody's, forehead, on a skinhead's forehead. So that was all part of the makeup of growing up.
So was that laying the foundation for the warrior spirit that we're going to see come out?
God, the Warriors, the film The Warriors, not The Warrior.
Oh, and The Wanderers?
Yeah. The Wanderers have predated it, but The Warriors, when you say the film The Warriors, that was it. That was our, we've got our colours, we've got our jackets, we've got our badges, and that's how we modelled ourselves.
We did the same thing. We had a little, not like a gang like you hear now, knives and all that shit. We had a little gang called the Sweats, based after watching The Warriors.
Oh, that was a classic. I mean, if you haven't seen the Warriors, you don't know what you're missing.
Yeah. So how were you at school then? Were you studious?
Sort of. I mean, on and off. My mother died when I was about 6 years old, so that kind of influence was lost, and the support of... my dad was a banker. He'd come to the UK from Pakistan in the 60s. I was sort of studious and on and off, but at school I got into a bit of trouble because of these gang fights. And as time went on, after the gang fights, I started to search for an identity because in the midst of this, you start to ask yourself, are you Asian? Are you black? Are you Pakistani? Are you English or British? Because these guys are telling you to go back home, and my home is in Spark Hill in Birmingham.
Were there any particular subjects you had an aptitude for?
History, classical studies, and I guess I had a bit of an aptitude for languages.
Aptitude for languages. Yeah. How many languages do you speak?
I speak 3 fluently.
Which ones are they?
Arabic, Urdu, and English. Arabic I learned and studied. Urdu was kind of parents, and English was a language I've always loved.
And tracing your ancestry back then, where were you descended from? Which countries?
Well, my parents come from Pakistan, which was originally part of India, and they themselves, my father, said that we are descendants of Genghis Khan. we have a family tree that goes back at least 300 years to the Great Mughals, Great Mughals, and the Mughals are descendants of the Mongols.
Okay, so you're going through school, bumping heads with the Nazis. Did you set your sights on further education, or did you have any career goals?
No, I started working with my father was an estate agent at the time, but he'd finished banking and started working with him for a while.
An estate agent, is that like real estate then?
Yeah, exactly, yeah, property.
So what was your role there?
My role was kind of more being officious and going to properties, measuring them, making particulars for them and stuff, and then trying to get them sold off to different buyers.
Okay. So life is going plain sailing for you at this young age in your 20s. Mm-hmm. And then what happened then in relation to Bosnia?
So I'd started studying law. This was around 1991. I was working for the DSS back at that time as well. I'd finished a job with my dad. And it was a time when I was kind of rediscovering who I was. And that was connecting to my identity as a Muslim. I didn't know that there was an indigenous country of Muslims in the heart of Europe, blonde-haired, blue eyes. No idea at all until I heard, I think I saw it on CFAX, if you remember, was that the teletext thing that used to be on the TV, that there are Muslims in Bosnia being massacred. So I met some of these guys who'd come over as refugees. I spoke with them, talked to them, and heard some really, really horrific stories. So I eventually joined a convoy that took aid, food, and medicine over to those places, and it was a shock to see. I mean, we drove there literally by land and got there within 2.5 days, and it was the most shocking thing I've ever seen in my life.
All right, just going back a second then. How did you just meet the refugees?
So the refugees were coming to the mosques and to the Islamic centers and so forth, and there was a big aid effort at the time to support these refugees that have come over from Bosnia, and of course, the world was talking about what's happening there. It was a big conflict. So as part of my kind of connection or rediscovery of my own faith, it was to, Muslims aren't just brown people. There's a world of black and white people who are all Muslims, from Africa, from Europe, and that really attracted me to it, kind of.
Hearing about the atrocities then, were you apprehensive to go and do the aid thing?
Yeah, of course, I was, as anybody would be. But I also felt that from the stories I'd heard, and the stories were shocking, including a woman who told me that she'd been gang raped by Serb soldiers and her child had been killed. And, I'd seen these videos that somebody had gone there and recorded of the atrocities and people talking about what they'd gone through. And the shocking part was that this was happening whilst the United Nations were physically present. It was happening under their watch. And so I felt guilty and I felt a sense of motivation. And after listening to these people, I've got to do something.
What was the scope of the atrocities you were hearing about?
Mass rape camps, children having their throats slit because soldiers didn't want to waste bullets on them, ethnic cleansing. And of course, the biggest thing that happened was the massacre in Srebrenica of 8,000 men and boys, and it was the biggest war crime that took place after World War II and the Holocaust. This was happening in Europe.
So we have a lot of young people watching the channel who may not be up on the history books. Who just to give a little, recap. Who was fighting who then? What was it all about?
So what you had is Yugoslavia, the old Yugoslavia, which was essentially under Marshal Tito after he died. It had been essentially communist, but a different type of communism. Yugoslavia was made up of different republics, including Slovenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia and Serbia. Croatia was Catholic Croats. Serbia was Orthodox Christian Serbs. Bosnia was made up of Muslims, Croats and Serbs. And Bosnia is where all of that, after the sort of communist government fell apart, the different republics declared independence. But in Bosnia, because you had all these three different groups, two groups had supports from Serbia and Croatia. The Muslims there were just by themselves. And people who were friends, Muslims, Croats, Serbs, one day, literally the next day, they were at each other's throats.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
It's like in prison in Arizona, the gang with the most numbers always picks on the gang with the least, these racial gangs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing, because old they're all the same race, right? So they're all Slavic. They're all of these Bosnian Serbs and Croats, they're the same people. It's just they have different faiths. And whilst the Yugoslav government existed before, it was okay. But once they declared nationalism, then it became, I'm no longer your friend.
To get into Bosnia, did you need special clearance?
No, at all. There were many aid organizations going. And as I said, the biggest thing was that the United Nations soldiers were there. The Pakistanis were there. The Bangladeshis were there. The Brits were there. The Dutch were there. The Norwegians were there. And I passed with them, sat with them, spoke to them. Some of the soldiers told me that they're really, really upset that they're not doing anything about stopping the atrocities. But yeah, you could go in quite easily.
What was it like arriving there? Take us through day one.
First day, I think I came into the city of Mostar. It's a beautiful, beautiful city historically. It's been rebuilt again. And there's this beautiful bridge that goes over from one side to the other. And that was built by the Ottomans in the 1500s. That had been destroyed. All the buildings around, you could drive through and not even see a single building without being filled with bullet holes or RPG, rocket-propelled grenades that destroyed walls and so forth. It was just beautiful buildings, beautiful countries, beautiful village destroyed.
What's going through your head? Because, you're thinking, right, I'm going to go over there and do the aid. I've heard these stories, but now I'm here and I'm seeing all this shit. Is it a whole new level in your head then? Of apprehension?
It's a multitude of different feelings. It's fear, it's apprehension, it's shame, it's wonder, because it's beautiful. I mean, there's a beauty about Bosnia that I can't describe. It's all of that. It's mountainous, and then, of course, as I said, there's that connection. I think, you know what, these guys are Muslims being killed. They don't look like me, they don't speak my language, I've got really very little in common, but I feel a connection to them. And it's that kind of propelled me to try to do a little bit more.
So where were you stationed and what aid were you able to administer?
So we were stationed in a town called Ostrazac, which is in a region next to the city of Jablanica. It was right next to a beautiful lake, and we were distributing food, medicine, blankets. There was a center there. And I was happy to be part of this. People were happy to see others come from different parts of the world to bring them aid, and it connected them to a wider world, as it were.
And did you hear the sad stories of the people you were helping?
Too many.
Any that you could describe?
I mean, I spoke to a couple of guys who were fighting at the fronts in a place called Konjic, and they told me how they had been, facing off an onslaught by the Serb nationalist army, and they had been in the trenches, and guys had been lying there in wait, trying to defend their towns, and they had got frostbite on their fingers, and their fingers had to get cut off. I mean, that's just one of the multitude of stories. As I said, probably the one that stuck with me the most was this woman that I'd met. That she was a refugee that come to the UK, and that she'd been gang raped. That really, really killed me.
All right, so you're in the reality of the situation. It sounds like you're getting deluged then with information from people who've survived atrocious things. you finding this a bit overwhelming at this point?
It was, but as I said, I wanted to do something more. I thought, the aid effort, I'm listening to all of these, one thing that you'd see is that the graveyards are full. Every day there are countless burials of women, of children, and so forth. So I made a decision. There was a foreign volunteer force of the Bosnian army, or the Armija Bosanska, and they were accepting foreign volunteers to come and join to fight. So I made a decision that I went going to go and join them, and I joined them, and it was a short-lived experience. It was very short because it was in the winter. There was nothing going on, and in the end, I didn't stay very long. But I did meet a group of people who had, quite in a sense, they had been deeply inspirational in trying to defend these people who were facing genocide.
Sounds like Orwell's The Road to Catalonia, is it?
Well, yeah, some people would call it that.
Did you get any training? Did you get a better rifle and bullets, or?
It was just for a little while. I mean, it was a very short amount of time, so there was no action taking place. There was a bit of running around, a bit of press ups and sit ups and that sort of stuff, and military gear to put on. But as I said, for whatever reason, if I had come a little bit later in the spring, I think I would have been part of the physical action.
Did you see like corpses or anything on the roadsides?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I did see corpses. I saw wounded people. I saw people with their eyes shot out. I see people with their legs blown off. All of that. Seeing
all that then?
Yeah.
Like first time you see a corpse, how did that make you feel?
You look, you stare, you imagine what that person must have been like, that person's life. You imagine how would you be if that was you, and then you try to blot it out of your head.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so what ended your stay in Bosnia?
I thought that I need to go back home to carry on the aid effort that I'd been involved with, and so I then made numerous trips to Bosnia, back and forth, bringing aid over. My stint with the Armija Bosanska kind of ended, but I still had I still supported them. I still talked to them every now and then, and I kept on taking aid convoys over. I think even until after the war.
Wow. Did you have any close calls then on those missions?
Not from a military perspective. From being on the road in a high mountain in Bosnia near a place called Travnik. Our van nearly went off the edge of the cliff because we didn't have our snow tires on.
Oh.
Yeah.
How did you save that?
It just happened. I wasn't driving. It was somebody else driving. I heard the guy shout out, "That's it, we're going over." And we were loaded with aid, so we were heavy, going downhill, and there's no barrier. And I thought, that's it. So I started to utter what's known as the Muslim last declaration of faith, as it were.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's it, it's done. But
your adrenaline must have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think I've even shared that story with anybody before.
Were you cheering when the truck didn't go over?
No, just breathing. Just breathing. Sharp relief of breath.
So, was it these missions that put you on the radar of MI5?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. I thought it was, but it wasn't. It was something much later, I think 98, 99. I opened an Islamic bookshop. It was part of my rediscovering who I was, which I felt had to be connected to learning. And I got to know somebody who was arrested in the Emirates, tortured, and forced to sign a confession that he's part of an extremist group. This is before 9/11. And MI5 came to my house about him at 6 o'clock in the morning. And this is really important because the guy who came to my house is a particular agent. He called himself Andrew. He turns up to my house with with two people, with a guy from a special branch. He's different to the others. The other two are like coppers.
Yeah.
But he's different. He speaks Arabic. He's white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed and ginger-haired. And he's different. he's intelligent, and he starts to talk to me about my friend. How do you know him? Who is he? Etc. Etc. And that's the first encounter I have with these guys, and I don't see them again now for quite some time. And I do see him again. I'll tell you about that when we get to it.
So the next is the Afghanistan
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, people have seen the lies that come out post 9/11 now. Tony Blair's bullshit speech, weapons of mass destruction. I think generally people are hip to how the public was manipulated into kind of going along with this at the time in the West, even though there was massive protests against it. It's, you know, with the Iraq one, these things still went ahead. So what was your interest in this one?
So in 2001, around the spring, I decided to go with my wife and kids to Afghanistan. At the time, it was run by the Taliban, so people do ask, "So why would you do such a thing?" and so forth. So my response is quite simple: is that I wanted to, as part of the educational process, that I wanted to impart to people about, from what I was doing in my bookshop and stuff. We helped to open a school in Afghanistan, especially a girls' school, which people said the Taliban won't allow female education, but they did, as long as it wasn't a kind of a Western, quote unquote, syllabus. So we prepared it, we set up the school, and it was already up and running by the time I went there. So that's part of what I was doing there, and continued to do so happily. I came across a few things that were shocking.
Like what?
I was driving around Kabul city center one day.
What a way to start a story.
Yeah. And as I came to the center, I see like crowds. There's a crowd around this roundabout. As I get close, I stop the car because I can't get through. So I walk and I join this crowd, and I see like there's 4 people, and each one of them is hanging off a crane that has been left at the end. And it was a pretty shocking thing to see. These 4 people have been executed, apparently for setting off a bomb somewhere. Wow. And that was kind of the harsh justice that existed around in this place. So
have they been executed by the government or by the Taliban?
The government of the Taliban.
The government of... That's right. It was Taliban running the country at that time. I see.
Yeah.
So you must have become hardened from Bosnia now just to see this stuff, and it wasn't...
No, I'd never seen anything like this.
Okay.
And I can't say you could ever harden to something like this. So no, it's shocking. It's a shocking thing to see. Of course it is. But it's just a reality. You accept that this is what's going on here. This is a different world that you're in. And I guess I remained there and tried to do whatever I could to try to change the situation in little bits and bobs through aid, through education, which is what I was doing.
So, prior to the invasion, then, was it easy to deal with the Taliban and have them to authorize what you wanted to do?
Well, they didn't stop the school, which was a plus, because the crucial thing was they weren't, from what the media had said, they're not keen on female education. But we had a girls' school running with buses picking them up and dropping the kids up, dropping them off, and stuff like that. The Taliban were like anybody else; they're human beings. They're born out of a war, 30 years of war prior to that with the Soviet Union and stuff like that. There's all sorts of corruption. These guys are strict, they're hard line. But many people accepted them because they brought about security. At the same time, there was something else going on. Osama bin Laden's down in Kandahar, which is down the other side of the country, and there's stuff going on with him. And of course, when the September the 11th happens, they refuse to hand him over to the Americans, with whom they have no treaty anyway. And that is where my story of, the real kind of story begins, the invasion of Afghanistan.
So I've tried to read up as much about this as possible, and I've, watched people like David Icke talk about this stuff as well. And you must have so much expert knowledge that I really feel privileged that I'm able to pick your brains on this. So my understanding is, from what I've tried to learn, is that Osama bin Laden was like a US asset against the Russians, and the whole family, we're America were on their side, but then it flipped because of they needed a pretext to do these invasions. Is that?
I wouldn't call Osama bin Laden an asset, though I would say they were definitely on the same side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, against the Soviets, that's right. There was the whole movement of the Mujahideen and fighting the Soviet Union and so forth. Of course, the Americans brought in the Stinger anti-aircraft missile system, that's what changed the war. So this Stinger knocks out all of these MI-25 helicopters. They're called the Devil's Chariots. They've got an arsenal of rockets and machine guns and God knows what. And the Afghans, they can't bring these things down, but they are natural fighters. They are natural fighters. I mean, I can tell you that anybody can tell you this.
Yeah, remember wasn't there a UK invasion hundreds of years ago?
Yeah, there was
and they allowed
one guy to survive. You know it, right?
What's that story? Tell.
That's the story. I don't remember all the details. I think maybe in the third Afghan war against the British, and the British tried to. I think Churchill had been there at some point as well. He had his finger in there as well somewhere. But this, out of I think 10,000 soldiers over a period of a couple of weeks, the Afghans raided over the Khyber Pass, which is now between Pakistan and Afghanistan, this British force, and eventually only one person survived.
Wow.
And he was left to tell the tale. The Soviet Union lost in Afghanistan, and America now, as we're speaking today, they are negotiating with the Taliban. And not just the Taliban, 5 Taliban members, senior members, who were held with me in Guantanamo.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, let's go over to 9/11. So I started trading the stock market as a young person. I was trading not just shares, but options. In America, I was a stockbroker. So I had a Series 7 license. I also had the branch manager license and the options principal license. So in the week before 9/11, options on airlines, basically betting airline shares were going to go down, the trading volume just went through the roof.
Wow.
This was my wake-up moment as to how my bubble world of thinking how the world worked was just completely destroyed. So it's on the news then. After 9/11, these options trades, it's headline news. The clip's still on YouTube. It says, this has to be terrorist insider trading. We're going to track these guys down and they're going to face the consequences of their actions. And it gone, disappeared out the news.
Oh.
Years later, I think I was in Arizona jail. Perhaps it was the David Icke book. Well, this has been confirmed now by numerous other researchers into this. Those trades were indeed traced to a brokerage that was run by ex-CIA. And anybody involved in those trades was interviewed by the feds and deputized, which meant if they ever spoke to anybody about it, they would be thrown in prison.
Wow.
So they put out a conclusory report from the investigation saying there was no abnormal trading, and they just tried to justify it for all this bullshit. But I read the whole thing. But because I'm an expert in options, I could see through all that. So in my mind, I'm convinced that not only did members of the US intelligence community know that it was coming, they profited from it.
I mean, I don't know the details about that. What I do know is, of course, they knew something was coming. That's a fact. And they knew something was coming is because Al-Qaeda had made threats against the United States before. There'd been hits in Nairobi, the US embassy in Nairobi, in Dar es Salaam, in Tanzania. So America knew something was going to happen. To what extent, to how much, I don't know. But of course, something was going to happen, and there's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I don't subscribe to the theory that the Americans that it's an inside job. I think it's much more complicated than that. But yeah, their intelligence told them something's going to happen, for sure.
Because there's so many different factions, isn't there, in intelligence and in the federal government and the state governments. And so that, yeah, I understand the complexity thing. So, all right, so you've got this thing that happens, 9/11, that's then immediately used as a pretext for these invasions. And how's this affecting you then, these invasions?
Well, gosh, I was in my house in Kabul, so we lived in the city center in Kabul. And I can't remember the date exactly, but I remember this. No, 9/11 already happened. People were already talking about, the U.S. may strike Osama bin Laden. Now, bin Laden is in Kandahar, which is like, it's like from here to Scotland, where I was. It's a big distance. So I didn't get the sense that they're going to strike Kabul, but I was wrong because they did. They struck everywhere. And the first thing that happened was the cruise missiles, the Tomahawk cruise missiles. And I can't remember where they came from first. It might have been from Uzbekistan up in the north, but later they came from Pakistan. They came from both ends. And they started landing. And I felt the shockwave of these cruise missiles. They hit some Taliban positions up on the hill. But it's a strangely cathartic sound that you hear, right? Not the explosion, but the aftershock. And the aftershock of the windows smashing of all the houses simultaneously. And terrifying, of course. But that sound is the one that remained.
I'm getting goosebumps.
I took my kids, my wife, next door neighbor's kids, their wife, into a cellar. We boarded up everything as much as we could, had put mattresses, thinking, I hope and pray that no missile lands on my house. Because if it does, this place that we're trying to save ourselves is going to become our grave. But we were fortunate.
And how long did that go on for, all these bombings?
For a little while, we evacuated like the next day.
Where did you go?
We got out to a place called Logar, which is just about a mile or so out. And then from there, eventually I evacuated to Pakistan with my family. Although I did get separated them for a few weeks, which was in itself a really shocking, difficult period of time. But I did eventually meet up with them.
Did that end the humanitarian stuff you were doing in Afghanistan?
Yeah. The school was hit. The school was destroyed. And, thousands of people were killed. Thousands of killed.
Collateral damage.
Yeah. In fact, there's one bomb that I learned later. I remember the shockwaves of these bombs. This bomb landed miles and miles away, not like the Tomahawk cruise missiles. It's called the Daisy Cutter. And it is a 15,000 pound bomb. It's not the biggest bomb now. Now they've got a 22,000 pound bomb, which Trump used in his war. But that 15,000 pound bomb, when it dropped, you could feel it's like an earthquake. And I saw the crater that it created. It was like I don't even know how to describe how big it was. But that's the type of ordnance they were using in Afghanistan.
And, years later, I think it was the BBC that went on to report at some point there was like 500,000 dead in Afghanistan and Iraq. Collateral damage, more than half of them women and kids. Yeah,
I mean, it hasn't stopped, to be honest with you. That was all of that. Then later afterwards, they started what's known as the drone program. So it's a targeted assassination where they literally send up drones and those drones strike people based on intelligence or dodgy intelligence. And it doesn't matter who they kill because it's just the people operating say it's just like a video game.
What's it called? Collateral Murder, Julian Assange video.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're just like joking around and stuff, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to Julian about this before. He's incarcerated, and that's exactly what it is. It's a game.
It's obscene, isn't it? So, what then was the reasons that you believe the US invaded those countries? What was the real reasons, not the bullshit that Tony Blair was trying to make us believe?
I'll tell you this much. Afghanistan, they may argue because bin Laden was there. They may argue that Al-Qaeda was connected to it, and they could argue that, okay? Though that's not a reason to invade an entire nation. That's not a reason to kill more people in like 2 days than were killed on September the 11th. Like that's doesn't make sense, and it's not justice either. You get the people who did it, but you don't get everybody else. That doesn't make sense. But I'll tell you what happened. The invasion of Iraq only happened because of the invasion of Afghanistan. And Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Nobody in Iraq had anything to do with 9/11. And I'll tell you about what happened, if you let me, with this connection. So after I'd been captured by the Americans, and I'll tell that story later, but I was held in a place called Bagram, which was a torture facility. The CIA and the FBI, they sat with me in an interrogation. They said, if you don't cooperate with us, we're going to send you either to Syria or to Egypt.
Could you first describe how you were captured?
Yeah, sure. So I'd evacuated my family. We got into Pakistan. I have relatives there and so forth, and we remained there, trying to help other families and so forth that are leaving. Still hoping that our school's still open, but then I found out it's been destroyed. 31st of January, midnight, 2002. About to go to sleep. Bang, 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 bang on the door. I'm in Pakistan, in Islamabad, in the capital. I open the door. There's a whole load of people there. Not a single one of them is wearing a uniform. Nobody's showing me any ID. They storm in. I see a taser crackling in the background and a handgun. It goes straight to my head. Straight to my head. I don't even have time to react. I wouldn't know what to do. If I knew how to react, I wouldn't know how to react. So I just comply. Gun to the head. They push me onto the ground. Now, nobody says a single word. Everybody's silent. And they push me onto the ground, shackled my hands behind my back, shackled my legs, hood over the head. Pick me up into the back of this vehicle. The last thing I see before they put the hood over my head is they're going into my house. My wife and kids are sleeping there. At this point, I don't know who these guys are. Pakistan's got all kind of bandits and robbers and stuff, and that's why I think who they are.
You think it's over?
I think it's, yeah. I said, please don't go in there. They took me into this vehicle. Somebody lifts off the hood off my head. I'm in the prone position. 2 guys in the front. They look really funny because they're white guys. They're like, they're dressed as Pakistanis, but they're not fooling anybody. And they speak in American accents, and they say, you can either answer our questions here or answer them in Guantanamo Bay. And then...
what was your response?
Then one of them says he produced a pair of handcuffs, and he cuffs my hands are cuffed by those, those plastic cuffs that they use, the ties. The ties, yeah. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So they're already cuffed with those. He brings in a pair of handcuffs and he cuffs my already cuffed hands. He says, these cuffs were given to me by my wife's friend who died on September the 11th.
And it's your fault, of course.
And I said to him, wouldn't she think you're stupid for catching the wrong guy? In my prone position there, I'm telling you.
Oh, good answer.
And, since then, I've discovered who that guy is.
Really?
I actually know who he is. I've discovered through a whole series of investigations who that guy was.
Wow.
But yeah, that was it. Then they took me to this place, this secret place, Pakistanis holding me, but the Americans interrogating me. After the next couple of weeks, they hand me over to the American military, and that's when I become a prisoner of the US military.
So was Pakistan complying reluctantly because the Americans were just flexing and throwing so much money around?
That's exactly what the Pakistanis said. That is verbatim what the Pakistanis told me. They said to me, listen, son, we know you've done nothing wrong here. You're legally in the country. You're not wanted for anything. But if we don't cooperate with the Americans are going to strike us hard.
Wow. So, first day in captivity.
So they take me from Pakistan, hooded, shackled, and they put me onto this C-130 transport plane, it's a military plane. They shackle my legs. They put a cargo strap over my lap, and my hands are behind my back, and my head is hooded. And then there's I can hear the sounds, the screaming of other prisoners. I can hear the roar of the engines. I can hear dogs barking. I can hear soldiers swearing in different languages. They've learned a few swear words in Arabic and Pashto and Farsi, and all of this kind of, cacophony of noise happening at the same time. And so this is my introduction to the Americans, the good guys. Up until I've never been to America in my life, but America had come to me. And this is what I was going to now see. This was just the introduction. Taken over from here to Kandahar airport, which the Americans had taken over now. They'd built a makeshift base. And it was brutality from the get-go. I mean, as soon as we get there, I'm dragged through the mud. It's cold. It's cold. It's in winter. Dragged through the mud. 2 soldiers sit on top of me. Literally sit on top of me. One in my small on my back, one on my head. Like that, his knee down there. I feel a knife from my trousers, slicing off my clothes, then going to the back, slicing off my shirt and everything. And naked as until the day I was born, dragged into this little area where there's lots of soldiers, lots of spotlights, photographs, trophy photographs, dogs barking. They spray us with this kind of delousing stuff or something. It seemed really weird. And then shackled. And just after that, zip, my facial hair on my head, all shaved off. And it's happening to every single prisoner. And then taken into this tent where there are 2 FBI agents. They've got FBI caps on in this tent and they asked me, "When's the last time you saw Osama bin Laden?"
Oh, God.
"When's the last time you saw Mullah Omar, the leader of the Taliban?" I said, "Never." "Oh, you speak English?" I said, "Yeah." "How come?" I said, "Because I'm from England. That's what they speak there." And he said, "Whoa, where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Birmingham." I'm standing here, nothing on, shackled, right? And this guy's asking me where am I from. I said, "I'm from..." "Oh, that's near Stratford-upon-Avon, the home of William Shakespeare. I've been there. I've been to the Royal Shakespeare Theatre Company and seen a play of God knows what." And I'm thinking, I'm having a talk about Shakespeare in this tent here with these guys who are about to torture me. But yeah, and then after that, they put on the kind of the infamous signature orange jumpsuit of Guantanamo, and then I'm taken into this place, which is a barn converted into holding cells that with razor wire. So we've got razor wire that's dividing me and the other prisoners, and I'm there for the next few weeks.
I was in that same orange jumpsuit, like radioactive orange in Supermax in Florence,
So tell
Arizona.
me, do you remember the name
Of?
the person who makes those suits?
Oh, I don't know, but I've Googled it since, and it comes on under correctional clothing online.
Okay,
Because I bought some online. I've got
Did you?
some.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were they
yeah.
2 piece? The 2 pieces, or was it
So I started out in the orange jumpsuit.
the actual full jumpsuit? Okay.
Yeah. But so in the remand jail, you're in black and white striped, like a top and trousers. After your time in your orange jumpsuit in the prison system, you get orange trousers and an orange t-shirt.
Yeah. Okay.
And deck shoes.
Yeah, exactly. So so in the beginning it started off as different colored jumpsuits. It was blue and orange, right? But then when we went to Guantanamo eventually, I went to Guantanamo after a year. I was held in Kandahar and Bagram, and I'll tell you about some of the atrocities I witnessed there. And so eventually they did give us those very same things. The reason why I asked you the name, because the name is ingrained in my head. It's Bob Barker.
Really?
He's the guy. He's the guy who made those horrible
He's making all that money off human suffering.
Bob Barker.
Bob Barker. All right, so you've described how you got there. What happens next?
So yeah, I'm in this place in Kandahar for about 3 weeks or so. They give us buckets.
Can you sleep? What's your sleeping situation?
It's impossible to describe. I mean, it is like the most shocking thing I can describe. I've never experienced anything like it, and I've been in war zones. I've never experienced anything like it. The lights are on 24 hours a day, floodlights. The guards are constantly shouting.
Is it a dorm?
No, it's not a dorm. No. They've built like makeshift tents out of wood, and I'm in the barn, which is made of metal. But other prisoners are in these wooden tents, right? And they're kind of more dormish, but everybody sleeps on the floor.
So you're on the floor, no bunks?
No, on the floor, on the mud.
On the mud?
Yeah, on the mud.
Do you have like a mattress?
They give us a little mat, like
a yoga mat.
No, it's one of those camping mats.
Okay.
those thin camping mats. Yeah. So we got that and a bucket for
slopping out.
Toilet. Yeah.
What about the food?
The food is something called MRE, meal ready to eat. It's a US military ration pack, but they take everything out from it. If you've ever come across these things, they've got loads of nice little, things in addition to it. Condiments and stuff, but that's all gone because we could use the spoon as a weapon. We could use the Tabasco sauce as something to throw at somebody. So everything's gone except this little packet, this cold packet of food, and you just use your teeth to rip it open to eat it with.
You didn't even get a spork.
Not even a spork. Not even a spork. No, I know. We did later, much later, but at this time, everything was a weapon in their eyes. They had just, in the minds of the Americans, they had just caught the world's most dangerous terrorists. That's how they viewed us.
So are you allowed to talk to the other prisoners?
No.
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 Even sneakily,
We do, of course.
have a
We do.
whisper?
We always do. We always whisper, like that. But
Did you learn where the backgrounds of the other people, what they really were?
yeah, there's different people from all over the world, and I can talk about that in a minute. But one of the reasons why they kept you in a state of fear in the beginning is you've got a guard pointing a shotgun or an M16 at you at any given time of the day. And if they think you're moving or doing something in the wrong way, you hear it straight away. Straight away, you hear it. And I heard that sound so many times. I don't even think I'm afraid of it anymore. That's how often I heard it in the early days.
What about having a shower? Were you allowed to?
No, there was no showering.
No showering. Did you have access to water? Could you have a bird bath or anything?
They did give us a 500, one of these, a bottle, a 500 milliliter water bottle a day to drink from. But that was it. There was no. If we wanted to shower, it's going to be such a humiliating process that you don't even want to do it. So it just you don't do it.
Any degrading strip searches yet?
Oh, God, I can't even describe them. Horrible. I mean, you must have been through them.
I'm lucky because they just ruled the finger wave on Constitution in Arizona, whereby
Really?
rubber gloves and fingering the bomb from the guard.
Yeah, well, that's standard. That is standard, and far worse, far worse. I can't even describe some of the stuff that stuff.
All right, so I imagine that you guys are like dazed, confused. The arrestees are like, what the fuck has just happened? 1 minute we had a life, next minute we're all in here, guns pointed at us, being treated like animals.
Yeah.
What was the next level that you went to after all that?
From there, so then they moved me to a place called Bagram, and Bagram is like it's a big airbase that the Americans had built. They'd taken it over from the Taliban, and the Americans were there, the Brits were there, and it was a bigger facility, a little bit more permanent. It was a old Russian warehouse. Really, we talked about Afghan and how tough they are. The Russians had built this place just before they got defeated, or just and they're left here. And now the next superpower has come, and so you can see all of this stuff in Russian, and they're taking me to these different parts of this huge building for interrogation. In Bagram, I was held for 11 months. And there's no natural light there. It's just floodlights. You don't ever get to go out, ever. There's no hot food. There's no phone calls. There's no visits. There's nothing. There's just interrogators and screams. And in the area where you are, in a communal kind of area, you sleep on the floor. There's massive camel spiders, the most terrifying creature
I've seen
ever
pictures
seen.
of them online. Yeah. They're like the size of dogs.
I can't describe to you. That's the most frightening creature I've ever come across in my life. Like, it is scary. And for those of you who ever want to search this damn thing up, it's the only arachnid that has 10 legs. And the two at the front are not technically legs, they're kind of feelers, but they're big. And it is deeply aggressive, it is very fast, it has pound for pound the most powerful bite in the insect world. And I saw people bit by it. And I could not sleep at night when I knew those things existed. And that was just one of them. There were scorpions, and the upsetting thing is that sometimes the soldiers would come along, the nasty soldiers, because they weren't all nasty. They'd come along and they'd throw them into the cells. What
was the bite wound look like?
I saw one guy. His flesh had been eaten away, literally. It looked horrible. I can't even describe what that kind of wound looks like, but it's like a chunk of flesh has just been taken out and then rotted away.
So do they like aggressively do those things to humans, or is it just when humans are like pushed close to their environment?
Yeah, it's the latter. They won't just chase you, but they're not scared.
Arizona's got a lot of dangerous insects.
I've heard that there are several of these particular spiders in the Mojave Desert.
Right.
Yeah.
We had a whole variety of scorpions.
Wow.
There's the tiny little ones that you could barely even see. They're almost transparent, that cause the most harm.
Yeah.
Not the big ones.
Not the big ones. Yeah. Here we had the big ones, so they look scary, but they're not as poisonous.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the really dangerous ones.
Did you have cockroaches, mosquitoes?
Yeah, all of those things.
Are they pestering you throughout the night?
Yeah, there's even these ants, we call them. In Afghanistan, they call them 4x4. And they're not like the tiny little things we have over here.
Yeah, piss ants, they call them.
Is that what they call them?
Piss ants.
These are huge. We call them 4x4 ants. Yeah, you had all of that.
That big ants?
Yeah, I mean, literally. mean that big.
Oh, that big, that big.
Yeah, that big.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Huge.
Because the nature and the insect environment becomes a big part of your everyday life when you're trying to survive an environment like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. The things that you would normally reel from and turn away from and be shocked fascinate you.
Yeah.
They are a window to life, to other life, to normal life, as you would know.
My writing was discovered by The Guardian because of my interactions with the cockroaches in the jail that I was writing about.
Wow, that's amazing.
Oh, yeah. All right, so you're in this new part now where people get interrogated. There's no natural light. There's just the spotlights. You can hear people screaming. Did they pull you out for intense interrogations?
Regularly, all the time.
Could you take us through an interrogation?
Yeah, I mean, so they'd ask you to assume the position. This position would be that you lie on the floor in the prone position, put your hands behind your back, lock your legs together, turn them up. They rush in, they shackle you from behind, they shackle your legs, they put a hood over your head. A guard locks his arm on this side and on this side. You've probably seen this stuff, I'm sure, that with maybe different types of prisoners. And then you're in this, you're like this, and they take you off to the interrogation room. And in the interrogation room, it would vary from military intelligence to the CIA to the FBI. And I remember once somebody came from DEA.
Did they always identify themselves as which branch of the government?
Yeah, pretty much do. But it's not like they show you a card.
Yeah,
there are no rules here. There's no lawyer here. They can do whatever they want. Anybody can say whoever he can say whoever he is, however he is. But remember, I told you that there was a guy called Andrew who came to my house.
Yeah.
Right? In 98 or 9. So this was back in Kandahar. They take me into an interrogation. I'm on my knees. They put me on my knees. My hands are behind my back. There's a gun towards my head in the desert, in this tent. Lift up the hood. Right in front of me. Andrew.
That's where you first met him?
That's the second time I met him. First time he was in my house where I offered him a cup of tea.
Oh, second time you met him.
Second time I meet him here in here. And he says, "Oh, look, Moazzam, look what you've got yourself into." I said, "Really? I did this to myself, did I?" And the funniest thing is that he sits me down and he looks at the soldiers and he sees all that stuff on me, the shackles and the hood. Is all that necessary? Yes. So Andrew just goes quiet. Then he puts on this table, he puts this Mars bar down. He said, "Look what I brought you all the way from England." I said, "Thank you, Andrew. But I don't like Mars. I never have."
And then is it just the same old bullshit questions they kept asking you?
Yeah, so he comes...
When the last time you saw the Sama?
Yeah, so he comes again. Andrew comes again. So Andrew comes... He's a spook, right? So he's haunting me. And so he comes again, but so do other people from different agencies. And I'm an English speaker, so I'm a commodity. The majority of people here are Afghans and Arabs and stuff, and most of them don't speak English. But me, okay, I am. So everybody wants to talk to me, and that's a blessing and a curse at the same time. So a year of this goes by, and the worst time is May 2002. I'm being interrogated by this very scary-looking guy from the CIA who does not blink when he looks at me for a whole hour. He just stares, burning blue eyes right into my eyes. FBI guys around him, but this guy, he just stares, and he's holding a rifle in his hand. And at the end of this, he says, "Moazzam Begg." He does that. I was like, that guy was damn scary.
And what did that mean, the thumb down?
To me, he said, then afterwards, after the FBI guys had gone, he said, "I've decided to send you to Egypt to be tortured."
Fuck off.
Yeah. Now, while this was going on, they take me into this next room. They tie me up again. And then they bring pictures of my wife and children.
No. Where were they at this point? And did they know where you were?
My family were at home. Well, they had been at home. I didn't know what happened to them that night. I didn't know what became of them. I had no idea, no communication. They bring those pictures, which they seize from my house. And then I hear the sound of a woman screaming in the next cell. And I'm terrified. I'm shocked. I don't know what's going on. And they start saying, "Where do you think your wife is? Where do you think your kids are? What do you think happened to them?" And I didn't feel any. I feel terror up until this point. This time now, I felt anger. I wanted to take those shackles. I wanted to strangle him, because I thought this is what they're trying to tell me. So eventually, you know, they took me out, and you know, I started asking questions, and you know, some of the prisoners said, you know, we thought it was your wife as well. We thought, because we heard a woman as well, and so that was the rumor going around. The prison is that my wife's being tortured. Eventually, a soldier came up to me. He said, "Don't worry, your wife's. It's not your wife. It's somebody I trusted. I thought as much as possible." He said, "No, but I tell you this much: they are serious about sending people to Egypt and Syria because they already have done." When I got released, I found people and traced their cases, and the people were sent to Egypt and to Syria. And you know, I was talking to you about the Iraq War, right? So, in one of those interrogations, the CIA, those same CIA and FBI guys said to me, if you don't cooperate, we're going to send you to Syria or to Egypt, right? And we've already done that with a guy called Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi. That's crucial. That is so, so important. He was here sitting right in this seat with you, where you're sitting. And he didn't cooperate, and we sent him to Egypt. And he told his story within 2 days. They tortured him, they waterboarded him, they electrocuted him in Egypt, and he gave a false confession. As his false confession was the reason why we went to war in Iraq. The false confession was that Al-Qaeda was working with Saddam Hussein on obtaining weapons of mass destruction. That evidence was taken by Colin Powell, presented to the United Nations Security Council in 2003, and became the justification for the invasion of Iraq. Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi retracted the statement. They knew it was not true, but it became the reason.
Which enabled the US to spend billions, so companies like Halliburton and Cheney and the whole gang could just get rich at the taxpayers' expense and murder hundreds of thousands of innocent people.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Absolutely sickening, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, you know it's not your wife, but you're thinking, how can I get a line of communication open with my wife? Was there any means to do that?
Yeah, I mean, oh God. There was eventually. I think it was after about 6 months. I'd been in Bagram and Kandahar. So after 6 months, my wife had been pregnant with my youngest son, who I didn't know, so the Red Cross, the ICRC, International Community of the Red Cross, got access. And they did have sporadic access. They did come and have sporadic access with us every now and then. And they came and they gave me a little message. Child born, particular date in June, and mother and baby well. That was it.
That must have made your heart just go like,
yeah. Oh. I went back to my cell, covered myself and just cried because
I can imagine.
I didn't know his name. I didn't know where they were. I just knew they were okay and safe.
Yeah.
Which was enough, I guess.
Yeah.
Something even worse happened than, the torture that I had in May, and that was in beginning of 2003. They bring a prisoner in. They shackle his hand to the top of the cage in the front part, as they call it, the sally port, which is the area where they isolate the prisoner. And they tie his hand above to the top of the cage and hood him, which is what they used to do to all of us for periods of time. Sometimes if they catch you talking or doing something that you shouldn't be doing, that's what they do. So this prisoner, they did this to him, and they left him there for days. And they'd only unshackle him to go to the bathroom or to let him eat. But otherwise, they wanted to break him. That was one of the techniques they used. So at one point, he'd slumped, like his head went down. They opened the sally port door, and one of the soldiers shakes him a little bit. He doesn't move, so he starts punching him in the ribs, like repeatedly, bang, bang, bang. And then they unshackle him, they take him upstairs to the interrogation rooms, and I hear screaming. Then a little while later, I hear soldiers running around saying he's dead. I didn't know for sure if he's dead because nobody would say anything to me. About several months later, when I was in Guantanamo in solitary confinement in a tiny little cell, 2 CID agents come along. Criminal Investigation Department. I didn't even know this existed in America, but they come along and they're different to all the other interrogators. This time they come along and they show me the picture of this guy who died that day. The first time they confirmed that he's dead. There's a photograph of his body. Then there's photographs of the soldiers that were on duty that night. So here's the great irony. They say to me, could you point out the soldiers that you think were involved in his abuse, that you witnessed? I said, yeah, I can. This one and this one and this one. Would you be prepared to be a witness in a potential trial against these guys? I said, are you serious? I said, I've been held now for almost 3 years without charge or trial. How are you going to take me to any court, let alone, this one? How are you going to do that? So his story was told in a film called Taxi to the Dark Side, which won the Oscar for best documentary in 2008. And it's about this guy because he was a taxi driver, an innocent taxi driver that they picked up and they killed him. They beat him to death.
Because if you're innocent, you can't confess, but by not confessing, you're withholding information, so we're just going to torture you to death.
Yeah, that's what they've done to him. And my understanding, I've read all the documents about the case. It was a racist killing because what they did is that every time this guy was kicked, they used something on him. You might have come across it. It's called the peroneal strike. It's like a Thai boxing style kick that's delivered to the top of the thigh to subdue a prisoner that's non-compliant. Every time he was kicked, he said, Allah, Allah. So they weren't even torturing him for information. The soldiers found it amusing that this guy says this, so let's just see how often he says it. And they kicked him, I think, over 100 times that night. And that the report, the autopsy report says that his leg would have required amputation had he lived.
Oh.
Yeah. So it is a...
And did he have a family and kids and everything?
He did. And they didn't know for weeks what had happened to him.
Jesus. So what else happened before you ended up in Guantanamo?
So, after all of this, literally, I wrote a little message to the Americans. I said, I've witnessed murder. I'm a witness to murder. And no matter what happens, I will never forget this. And I will try to, do whatever I can so the world knows. But I was a prisoner myself. I had no access to anything. They put me on a plane with a whole bunch of other prisoners, including senior Taliban members, hooded, shackled, tied up with a three-piece suit. You know the three-piece suit, right? Yeah. For those who don't know, it's not what you're wearing right now.
Describe it.
Describe the three-piece suit.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a handcuff with chain going around your waist, and then there's another chain that goes from your waist to your ankles, and that is the three-piece suit.
And that's exactly how they took us to court in Arizona. And when you're walking in the three-piece suit, you do what's called a penguin shuffle.
Okay, yeah, well, which is interesting, right? Because when I eventually met a lawyer in Guantanamo, Clive Stafford Smith, this is the shocking part. I had noticed whenever I'd look at the shackles that it says "Made in England." I'd noticed this many, many times, and the company's name was Hyatt's. Hyatt's were based in Birmingham, where I come from, right? So when I meet Clive, I said, you know what? Me, you, and these shackles have in common. He says, what? I said, we're all made in England.
So is that just another contractor profiting from all this?
Exactly. And research it, and I did research it. Hyatt's used to make the collars, the quote-unquote, excuse my language, the collars during slavery.
We'll have to take that out because it's a violation of YouTube's.
That's what they're called to this day. That's the kind of the N-word collars.
Okay.
For the escaped slaves who were renditioned back to their masters. So that's where the first time when the term rendition was used. So the connotations and the connections to all this are really, really serious.
And who owns Hyatt's?
I'll tell you who owns them. I know who owns them. BAE Systems. BAE Systems owns Hyatt's.
I've watched those shows in the stock market.
Yeah.
Yeah, big contracts.
Big, huge and they, to this day, they relocated in the US. They're doing, in America, of course, they're doing a booming trade with shackles for prisoners.
Even like the private prison contracts now are in the tens of billions a year.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so you go out of the chip pan into the frying pan then, do you?
So by the time I've gone through all of this stuff, right, and when some of the soldiers, again, there were some good, decent soldiers. Out of all of this, there were still decent soldiers who would do good things on the side, make sure, when other people aren't watching, pass over a little bit of food, give you a little bit of information. They were always decent soldiers, and it's important that we make that clear.
There's good and bad in every profession.
Yeah, exactly. And they were from all, black, white, Hispanic, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, all of that stuff. I didn't even know these terms, by the way, until I'd been imprisoned by the Americans. And so they told me, you're going to go to Guantanamo. And I said, to be honest with you, I cannot wait to go to Guantanamo, the world's most notorious prison, because after what I've seen over here, it's got to be better. And for all intents and purposes, it was better than this. It was better. Not to praise Guantanamo, but what gets worse than witnessing a murder?
So was that like Supermax, like an American Supermax conditions, Guantanamo?
I mean, I don't know what Supermax is like in America, but I think this was worse. And the reason why I say this is because I think in Supermax you don't have military presence. And so what you had here, I was held in a place called Camp Echo, where there were only 2 cells, me and another British guy. And they'd just built this new, and it was built, kind of chain link fence all around, and a green plastic sheet covering, so you can't see anything outside. That's around the whole camp. And in the midst of that, they've got these 2 separate cells that are built. And in the middle of that, they've got this kind of so-called recreation yard. A recreation.
2 cells only?
Yeah, 2 cells. At that point, there were only 2 cells.
So you had yours and he had his.
Yeah. And my cell is what? My cell is like I think it was an old shipping container, they say. It's cut in half. It's about 8 foot by 6 foot. And that is inside a room. And that room at any given time has 1 or 2 guards that are monitoring you 24/7. And they're looking at you. And they're noting everything you do every 15 minutes.
You still sleeping on the floor, or you got a bunk at this point?
No, it's a bunk, but it's a metal bunk with a small mat on there.
Yeah.
And you just watch 24/7.
Did you have a combination sink toilet?
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you press the toilet button, it sounds like a jet, doesn't
Sounds
it?
like it's going to suck your bum off. It's like...
Exactly. Exactly. Never come across anything like that, but it's pretty effective.
Yeah. And then shower access.
Yeah, so there's a shower connected to the other side of the cell that you don't have access to, but when you ask for, at specific times, you go to the recreation yard, and then they call it shower and rec, though I used to make fun of them. I say it's got to be rec and shower, because you've got to go to the rec first and then the shower. Right? But, so yeah, you go out to the recreation yard, and the reason why I said it's harder than Supermax, well, my vision of it is, in the beginning, this were the first few months, they'd take me out 15 minutes every 3 days. Every 3 days, I'll go out for 15 minutes. Before they take me out to the recreation yard, which is just a 15 by 15 area that is chain link fence all around, they have to call for infantry. So a Humvee with a machine gun fixed goes around and is parked. Then there's something called the MWD, which is the military working dog. That has to come along, and there's a dog there. Then 3 soldiers take you out. 2 of them get you shackled up, and 1 of them walks behind you with his piece, pointing at you just in case you do something. So I don't know whether Supermax is like that, but that's the process of taking you into the recreation yard.
That's next level Supermax.
And
like
you can see me.
military,
I'm a short guy. These huge, giant American guys with their bulging muscles and weapons. I'm thinking to myself, wow, how did I scare you so bad?
Did you ever get used to having guns pointed at you?
I can't say I got used to it, but I think I got less afraid of it, yeah.
Did you get used to the strip searches?
Never.
It's so degrading, isn't it?
Yeah,
like being visually raped.
It's impossible. You can't. I'm not a violent person, but if I would have been, I would have fought it.
Yeah. So you've got 15 minutes rec every 3 days.
Yeah.
What did you utilise those 15 minutes? What did you actually do?
So imagine you've got 15 foot by 15 foot. You run round and round and round and round and round for 15 minutes. I think I worked out in my head that by the steps I counted, that I probably did about 1.5 miles. But, you've got to change direction. You go 20 one way, 20 the other way. Every now and then, when the guards weren't looking, I'd climb up. Because the chain link goes over the top, so you can't get over. You climb up, and I look out, and I can see the sea. That is the Gulf of Mexico. That's what I can see. It's the only time I've ever seen it. And I can see, every now and then I can see a shipping tanker or maybe even a cruise boat.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did that give you hope?
All the time. I used to dream about it. I used to dream about just getting onto a boat and then across the ocean, go to maybe to West Africa.
So in your half of a shipping container cell was a space on the floor to like do push-ups, yoga, anything?
Boy. Press-ups, I became an expert. Expert. 2 fingers, commando press-ups,
One
back of the
arm,
hands,
one arm.
all of them. An expert in press-ups, yeah.
And did you do yoga or anything like that, meditation?
No, but because I'd done taekwondo when I was a kid, I did some of the kind of stretching techniques. My spiritual side really was connected to my Islamic faith, so kind of learning different verses of the Quran.
Were you allowed to have a Quran?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was.
What other reading material?
Oh God, Danielle Steele novels, Reader's Digest books, National Geographics from the 1970s with all the maps taken out. I mean, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. And Charles Dickens, British classics. So I read, I kid you not, I read Bleak House, David Copperfield, and A Tale of Two Cities in Guantanamo.
Yeah, just whatever you can get your hands on, isn't
Anything,
it, to get your mind
yeah,
out of that
yeah,
cell.
yeah.
But you said so the Quran was the main thing for
For me,
you
it
to
was
get
because
you.
it was really important. There's verses in the Quran. There's a story of Joseph, or Joseph, Yusuf in Arabic. He gets thrown into prison for a crime he doesn't commit. And he comes out of it much stronger. He comes out of it actually forgiving towards those people who did it, but he's forgiving because had it not happened to him, he wouldn't have been the person he was.
Exactly.
So I find that it brings tears to my eyes every time I read that story. It's pretty much the same in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, and it was a very, very powerful story for me.
If neither of us had gone to prison, we probably wouldn't even be speaking to each other right now.
No, we wouldn't. and importantly, your and my voice wouldn't have been heard in the way it is.
Yeah. So they did us a favour.
Yeah, I do say that.
Yeah,
I do say that. Yeah.
What else did you do in the cell to pass the time?
So there was letters that I could write, but they'd go through the Red Cross. And
Could you write to your wife by now?
I could, and I did.
That must have been amazing to get the first letter from your wife.
Yeah, but they were heavily redacted.
Okay.
So blacked out, There were letters from my daughter, 7 years old, that they had blacked out almost everything except "I love you, Dad," at the end. Nonetheless, I did get them, and they'd come at periods of, they'd write them, I'd get them 6 months later, So there was that. I started to write poetry, a whole load of poetry, which I've only ever written in prison. I wrote lists of things. I wrote words of things of different languages. I studied Latin, French, English, Arabic. We were very limited. I don't know how it is in prison America, but they gave us like pens that were that big.
So we were allowed like a golf pencil, the pencil you see in your betting shop.
Yeah.
And an anti-shank toothbrush, which was about that big as well.
So those toothbrushes, we had 2 types of toothbrushes. The anti-shank one was there was the little one that's a thumb brush, right?
Yeah.
But there was also the finger brush. So the first one they gave us was the finger brush because you can't do anything with that. The pen they gave us was kind of rubber. So it was it's not even a golf pencil. It's just it's malleable. You can't make a weapon out of it. They were very concerned about this.
Yeah.
Thing is, the prisons in Guantanamo, none of them were prisoners. None of them have been through a system of prison. So they don't even know the things that the American system had been trained to deal with in mainland America. Most of these guys didn't know. They're from like deserts in Mauritania and Afghan villages and stuff like that. They haven't got a clue what you guys are on about.
Were you allowed visits?
No.
No, like even legal representation?
Eventually, yes, after 2.5 years.
After 2.5 years?
Yeah. No phone calls.
No phone calls.
No visits, no newspapers, no TV.
You said there was originally, it was just you and another guy. Mm-hmm. Could you see him or communicate with him?
No.
No, through you see him in the prison movies through the vents and all that stuff.
We're
tapping on the pipes.
No, nothing. The pipes are not even connected to one another. I tell you what did happen though.
Dropping a note at rec.
Well, yes. Every now and then I did drop some, but there's a thorough checking of everything. They think we're the most dangerous people on the planet.
Yeah.
And it's really crazy, but The good thing that came out of this were the soldiers. Al, the guy you mentioned earlier at the beginning, right? That's where I met him. I met Al there. And he and many other of the soldiers in that environment, in that situation, see you at your worst and your best. And they come along and they want to know you. They want to talk to you, even though it's against the rules. It's actually, there's a name for it. It's called fraternization with the enemy, right? So Al comes in and I start to get to know him little bit by bit. We start to talk. And then as we got closer, he sneaks in a DVD player.
What?
Yeah, he sneaks in a DVD player. And now he's on the other side, so he can't come into the cell. And he brings in like one of my favorite films. I mean, I had never seen this film before, but it's my favorite since. And you know it well, it's Snatch. I reveled every second of it because it brought back everything, all those accents that are connected to Britain and the acting and the storyline and he's sitting there watching. There's probably nuances in there that he doesn't get as an American, right? But I'm listening, I'm watching it, and when he came over to my house, several years later, he said, "Do you remember Moazzam? We watched Snatch together." I said, "Wow, yeah."
Did he help you in any other ways?
Yeah, we used to talk all the time, and I'd help them as well. A lot of the soldiers, I speak to them and give them advice about different things. So Al just wanted to say, "Look, I don't judge any of you guys on anything. My job here is to guard you, but I'm not going to do it inhumanely to you." And that is something I saw more increasingly in Guantanamo. And him and several of the other soldiers rather, are the reason why I don't hate America. Otherwise, I would have left that place detesting America. But they're the reason why not.
So, I was for the death penalty. Idealistic thinking, someone kills my family in cold blood, I don't want them to die. But once you get in the system and learn the reality, so my lawyer got Ray Crone off death row, snaggletooth killer. State of Arizona paid expert witness $50,000 to say his teeth matched a mark on the victim, bite mark, when they knew it didn't. And then I worked with like 1 in 10 out of London who've gone and interviewed death row exonerees. They estimate that 1 in 10 are innocent on death row. Some lawyers have said up to a third of death row are innocent. They just grab a black guy, fry him in the electric chair before the governor's up for re-election to show how tough he is on crime, get more votes. So how many of the inmates were innocent? And when I say innocent, I mean like had absolutely nothing to do with anything versus people who could have been fighting back against the Americans, and whether the definition of that person being a hero to the local people repelling the foreign invader versus a terrorist according to the foreign invader, that's a whole other debate.
That's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked, because most people don't even look at that nuance. They think if you're fighting America, you're a terrorist. How does fighting America make you a terrorist? Because you didn't invade America. America invaded your land. If you're fighting back, you might not like the guy, you may not like what he stands for, but he's defending his homeland. So it's hard to know, because out of the 779 prisoners that were held in Guantanamo, there are only 40 left. That means 750 odd have been released. And that means they are not terrorists. They didn't do anything to America. They didn't do anything to anyone, but something was done to them. Including amongst those people who've been released are 5 senior Taliban members, including battlefield commanders, who've been released, and they are currently talking to American heads of state, including Mike Pompeo and others who recently, about U.S. withdrawal. And so they're the party that America is talking peace with. So you've got to ask yourself, so what was that war about again? And the other thing is, so there are a couple of guys that are accused of masterminding 9/11 in Guantanamo. They came several years after Guantanamo was set up. None of them have been convicted so far of any crime. Now, the law that exists in Guantanamo isn't the normal legal system in America, even if that was normal. It's something called the military commissions, where you can introduce hearsay evidence, where you don't have a jury, where there's no right to appeal, and the death penalty is on the cards. So despite all of that, and despite the fact that you can use torture evidence extracted by torture, they still haven't convicted anybody in 20 years. So that kind of tells you the justice system that exists in Guantanamo. How do you know if anybody's innocent and guilty when you don't even state what the crime is?
Yeah, some researchers were saying, these guys are mostly just farmers that were in there.
Yeah, so there are a mixture of different people. There's people who came to Afghanistan because they wanted to live in a Muslim society. There are people who were working on aid projects. There were people who were farmers. There were some people who were soldiers for the Taliban, but they were fighting another Afghan group. They weren't there to fight America, So there's different groups of people. And amongst those, the number of those who actually targeted America, there's probably, a handful, if that, but even that's not proven.
But if the public finds out there is no enemy, then there is no justification for war.
Exactly. And then there's no justification for making money off it.
Exactly. So they've got to put out all these stories. We've got the blind sheik and all this stuff. You hear all this stuff getting hyped up. This is essential, torture, this debate over torture. They're killing us. We've got to torture them to save our own lives and all this stuff. Well, my question is, you said so many got released one way, so many got, what about the ones that came out in body bags?
Yeah, so there are 9 prisoners who've died in Guantanamo. Some of, quote unquote, as they say, natural causes, though my belief is that there's no natural cause. Guantanamo is what killed you, especially if you were held without a child or trial. It was unjust. There were several who've died of so-called suicide. Right now, just to tell you an idea of what happens, I once had a panic attack in my cell, and they sent a psychiatrist, a military psychiatrist, so she's in full military gear. She sits down and she says, 558, that was my number. Have you ever thought about committing suicide? I said, no, I never. She said, didn't you ever think about getting your trousers off, threading your trousers with your sheet and tying a noose around your neck and tying it to the corner of your cell and just jumping off? Didn't you ever think about doing that? I said, not until you put the thought in my mind. About 6 months later, I was released. 3 prisoners turned up dead in their cell exactly with that technique. So the Americans have said that it was suicide. Others have said that this was, something more nefarious. Who knows?
And do family members of these victims get compensation in any way or recognition?
I've met with one of the guys was from Saudi Arabia. He's actually the chief of police of the city of Medina. And I met with him and, he said when they brought my son's body back to Saudi Arabia, he said he had no throat. They removed the throat. So there's no way of us even, doing a full, proper post-mortem investigation. We just have to take their word for it.
What was your lowest moment in there? And did you think you were ever going to get out?
I think the lowest moment the lowest moments would be when I receive a letter from home with pictures of my kids. I had a child born that I didn't get to see until he was 3 years old. So they were low moments in the sense of I'm happy to see these images, but they throw me off. They throw me off in keeping my focus. My focus when I don't get these things is that, I read my Quran, I do my press-ups, I do my workout, I do my reading. I get through the day, as you know, as a prisoner. You try to set yourself into some kind of mode and some kind of... When that comes up, I start telling myself, oh my God, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm somebody that's outside of this, and that just kills you.
So you mentioned the hope of seeing the water when you jumped up in the wreck.
Yeah.
But there's also the struggle psychologically. Nietzsche said, thoughts of suicide got me through many a lonely night. And contemplating suicide for me, when I was facing life, I thought, right, my life right now is in the power of this few people I have no power over. It's what's going to happen to me is all on them. But killing myself is giving me an option, like a sense of control, taking the power from those people. I could just kill myself and they don't have that power over me anymore. They can't determine my fate anymore. Did you ever contemplate suicide as well as escape?
I contemplated escape many times.
Yeah.
I had built up a plan, and it was, I'd started that from Kandahar and Bagram. I'd actually said that this plan would require me to get some people on my side. It would mean taking some of the soldiers hostage. The good ones will be treated good, the bad ones will get a kicking. And all of that was in my mind. I used to play it in my head every day. How I'm going to sneak through the barbed wire and stuff. All of that stuff. And I used to do it in Guantanamo too. Though it was much, much harder because you couldn't see anything. Everything was just an island, and you just don't know where anything is. But thoughts of suicide, really, I'll tell you straight, they never crossed my mind. Maybe it's to do with my faith, and maybe it's to do with just who I am. But I would have thought, in my view, suicide would have been that they have won. That's how I would have seen it. And the point at which I felt comfortable was when I said, you know what, I'm going to resign myself to my fate. I haven't got a sentence. I'm not even being charged, right? I don't know when it's going to end for me, but I will better myself here in this place. This place is going to make me stronger.
So you said that the photos came in at your lowest moment. Photos came in at mine because when I was facing 200 years, I did plan to do it, to slash my wrists, but I was allowed 7 photos. And looking at the pictures of my mum, dad, girlfriend, sister, thinking my mum's going to get a call saying your son just slashed his wrist in a foreign prison, he's dead. That's what stopped me from doing it. So those photos are what gave me hope. But when I asked you about hope and sadness, you said it was the photos that pulled you down to this sadness because you hadn't seen your son, etc.
I mean, those two things, they're so connected, they're interconnected, aren't they? Because it's you think to yourself, family is that's what kind of makes us who we are and connects us to the people that we love. And if they are no longer in that story, for me it was kind of a way to keep myself disconnected and survive. But had I thought of suicide, that would have been one of the things that would have, my children, I cannot do that to them.
So how on earth do you get out of this bloody prison?
You know what? There's several different things, and again, I've spoken about the decent guards and the decent people. There are also a handful of interrogators who are also decent, and they started
decent interrogator.
Yeah, I mean, eventually, I think after a while. So these are not, some are military and some are other, and they start to see and start to feel that they're part of something that is not right. They will be a part of history, and they were on the wrong side of history. And I think there are plenty of those now who slowly but surely have started to speak out, or at least recognize this was wrong. So one of the ways out for me was there was information coming to me from some of these decent guards. I just got to tell you this little story about just a girl she's from the US Virgin Islands. Now, most Americans don't even know the Americans have Virgin Islands, and they speak there with a patois accent, so that's how they talk. So, most of them black, but this girl, she's white. She's white, and I think she's from Arizona originally, right? And she's settled in the US Virgin Islands. So she speak with a patois accent, She speaks like that. And it's so funny because she's blonde head, blue eyed and stuff. So she comes along one day, and we've got to know one another and stuff, and she said, look what I got for you. Something about chocolate, man. So she brings this chocolate. She said, I got you a Cadbury's cream egg. And Cadbury's are made in Birmingham, which is where I'm from.
Didn't have the same reaction as the Mars bar.
No, because this was genuine. This was genuine. So she gives me this Cadbury's cream egg. Now, I don't tell the girl. I still haven't told her. I can't stand them damn things either. I can't. What is a cream egg? It doesn't work in my mind. But anyway, to humor her, I ate the damn thing. And she said, could you just give me back the wrapper because the rest is contraband. So I gave it back to her, and the rest is history. So I speak to her every now and then. I'm in communication with her, and I still haven't had the guts to tell her that I couldn't stand that cream egg. But it was people like that brought me information about things are changing. There's a Supreme Court decision that's been passed in the favor of the prisoners that allows you to have a habeas corpus hearing, though that never happened. But then eventually, a lawyer came over. His name's Clive Stafford Smith. I was introduced to him by way of letter. It said that he worked on death row cases in New Orleans for the past 20 years, and he's going to come and help you. And my initial reaction to death row was, I am screwed. Why would I have a death row lawyer coming to defend me in Guantanamo when I'm not even charged with a crime? But that opened the door, because he came to my cell one day. He got a whole ream of documents, listing what the torture that I told him about, stuff like that. He threw it on the desk and said, this crap's not going to work. We have to embarrass these people. It's the only way you're going to get out.
And he is an absolute godsend, isn't he?
Yeah.
Did you watch his documentary? Louis Theroux said it was one of his favourites. So Many Days on Death Row in America.
Yes.
Heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. 15 Days in May or 14 Days in May, I think it's called. Yeah.
Yeah.
About his. So Clive was just something else. He was something else, really, and especially because he's British. They only allow Americans on Guantanamo to represent prisoners, but he had joint British and dual American nationality.
Yeah, I've had some communication with Clive in the past. Would love to get him on the podcast.
Yeah.
So the legal process then sets you free?
No.
No.
There was no legal process. It's important that we say people don't get released from Guantanamo because of any legal process.
Right.
It's just a deal with governments. You get embarrassed. The British government got embarrassed. My dad was doing a campaign over here. He was saying, my son's been held in this place. He's been tortured. He's not had any rights. America and Britain are the best friends. How can you do this to your best friends, citizens? So eventually that's what turned it. Amnesty International, parliamentarians and stuff like that. So it was that, and that is what gets everybody released from everywhere. Whether the guys from Sudan or from Mauritania or from elsewhere, they come to an agreement. Nobody gets convicted and charged and convicted of any meaningful crimes.
So it doesn't end with a plea bargain.
There's nothing to bargain.
So if they let you go, then are they acknowledging that they made a mistake in any way?
No.
No compensation. No apology.
No.
Take us through the days of your release, what that was like.
The day of the release was amazing because it's a US military female officer comes along. She says, 558, we have decided to release you to the Brits, and there's nothing further that's going to happen with you, essentially, to paraphrase. I said, I don't really believe you, but, I'd spoken to Clive and he said, you will be released. So the day of the release is just fascinating. They take me onto this coach where there's 3 other British prisoners. There was 15 British prisoners altogether, but they were sent back in different batches. I was with a batch of 3 other guys, and all these other guys are all black Britons, and we're all sitting on together onto this coach, and they've got 10 soldiers for each prisoner. So and we're all in the so-called 3-piece suit. And I start laughing because it's the first time I speak to any prisoners now. I've been in solitary confinement. I see these guys and I start laughing and talking to them. I said, these idiots think we're going to escape on the way to freedom. The soldiers didn't like what we were saying. There were a couple of soldiers, of course, who'd come along and shook my hand before they left. And, I can't tell you the effect of those soldiers on me to this day. But these ones were from a new batch. I didn't know who they were. Get to the other side of the island because you've got to catch a ferry to get to the other side of the island where the airport is. In their haste to take us over, they'd forgotten the keys for the padlocks and for the shackles. No. So this was beautiful. It was so poetic. Somebody had to bring in a pair of huge wire cutters. And I kid you not, they snapped off our shackles.
Wow.
That's how I walked from US military custody to British custody. Now here, the police officers, right? And it was really strange because, these are bobbies. And one of them's a Scouser. And I can't tell you what it sounds like listening to a Scouser accent after years of being held by the Americans. I'm sure you know what that's like.
When I was, they took me to LA and they were like, we're going to put you on a plane first so you don't scare the passengers. And it was a Cockney flight cabin crew pilot. And just to hear the Cockney accent and for them to talk to me like I wasn't an animal, I was like,
It was a relief. It was strangely enough, these are police officers and they're probably going to take me to the police station, but they were intrigued. Even for them, this is like, wow, we're going to Guantanamo to pick up some guys. So he started talking to me like a human being. And there were no shackles. There was nothing. There was none of that stuff that the Americans do. And they bought newspapers. I was on the front page of The Sun. Yeah, exactly. And they bought chocolates.
Was the media all sympathetic?
It didn't seem like it, but just pictures of all 4 of us there. Dark-skinned guys accused of terrorism coming back from Guantanamo. It didn't look it, but I wasn't bothered. The coppers seemed nice. they bought chocolates and crisps and drinks and stuff like that. Wow, first time having chocolate in God knows, other than the one that had the cream egg. And then, we arrived back in RAF Northolt. And as soon as we arrived, 2 women walk on board, sit down next to me and said, Mr. Begg, you are under arrest under the Prevention of Terrorism. I thought, not again? Like, are you serious? So they bring in the meat wagon onto the plane, because it's a transport plane. They put me into the meat wagon on the plane, and then they drive me off all the way to Paddington Green Police Station.
Oh, I cannot believe what I'm hearing. Gate arrest, that's like your biggest fear.
Yeah.
But this is like multiplied.
Yeah. So this was standard procedure. I was told it was going to happen, but it was still
was it? Okay.
Yeah. So they take me to Paddington Green Police Station. As I go in the police station, I hear shouting, people demonstrating outside the police station.
Really?
Free him, let him go.
Yes.
The desk sergeant, the duty sergeant asks me, right, before they're going to take me into the cell, but do you want to make any phone calls? I was, oh my God, after 3 years, I'm going to get to make a phone call to who? I said, no, you know what? I'm not going to speak to anybody as a prisoner. I will. No, I said, no, I'm not. And I don't even know any numbers anyway. I've forgotten them all. So I spent the cell, a night in the cell. The next day, I was taken to my lawyer's house, where my father, my wife, my kids, including the new one I'd never seen.
Oh, how did that feel to see your kid and your wife?
I saw my father. My father was a big campaigner. Yeah. So he had 2 phones going and stuff like that, and fobbing off the Times and the Telegraph. He said, "No, I can't give you interviews right now," and stuff. Call back later. My brother, he went to the takeaway and bought all this junk food, like pizzas and doner kebabs and God knows what. And I couldn't eat that stuff. I've been eating. You know what?
Your stomach shrinks. I've never gone back to eating as much as I used to eat.
Yeah, you can't eat that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that stuff. I can't eat it. And then I see my kids, and that was probably the hardest because my kids didn't know me. My eldest daughter sort of remembered me. She was about 7 when I was taken, but the others, they and my newborn, who's now 3 years old, didn't know me at all.
Wow. And how did that feel when you looked at your newborn?
I said he was 3 years old now, right? So, when we eventually went back home, because he'd sleep in the bed with my wife, my job was now to kick him out. so he didn't like me very much.
The usurper.
The usurper. Yeah, he didn't like me very much. But, it was emotional for them. It wasn't so much for me because I had steeled myself, and I saw tears in all their eyes, but I'd done my crying in the first year.
What about flashbacks, nightmares, waking up the next day thinking, where am I? Am I really free? Yeah,
and back in those days, I used to see this dream all the time that I'm walking normally free, and I've got shackles on my legs and wearing orange trousers. But yeah, that kind of happened, far less now, but back in those days it happened.
Were you offered professional psychological help?
Nothing.
Nothing?
No, nothing. There were organizations that were campaigning with families and stuff like that, that helped, but nothing, nothing from the state at all. In fact, the state took my passport away from me immediately the moment I came back. Like, you are still deemed a threat and whatever it is. But one thing I did do is the organization that I work for now, I'm the outreach director, Cage, I went onto its website and I found, these are the prisoners that were held in Guantanamo. And this is who they are, this is where they're from. And I started to research, because I came across different prisoners at different times, and I never knew much about them. So I started to campaign, and there were relatives of people coming to see me. What about my dad? What about my son? What about my husband? And so it was this kind of sense of, obligation. I've got to help these people in whichever way I can. So that's how I started the whole campaign against Guantanamo.
Did MI5 want a word with you?
Oh, no, they were running a mile. Because one of the things I did straight away is I took them to court. A huge case, a massive case. I think I was told they spent 60 million in defending themselves with God knows how many barristers, like a whole army of barristers. And in the end, we came to a settlement, but it was... Evidence showed that the government, Andrew and many other people like him had been involved in the cases of many, and they were complicit in the torture of their own citizens. They knew their own citizens were being tortured, and they were fighting the state, so it's impossible. I told you that much amount of money they put in. So we eventually got settlements, but they didn't accept responsibility. What they did say is that David Cameron said at the time, we're going to order a judge-led independent inquiry into the torture. At the same time, I sat with the Met Police, heads of the Met Police, and I gave them evidence and details of Andrew and other people who were complicit in torture. These are British agents that took part in the torture of their own citizens. They began an investigation, and after a few years, they said, you know what, we can't do anything. I said, I never expected you to. This is too. They said, the government's refusing to cooperate.
It's like the CIA investigating itself for drug trafficking.
Yeah, exactly. But when I spoke to these officers, they said to me, we will go right to the top if it means Jack Straw, Tony Blair, so be it. And they were adamant. But I think they probably were a bit naive about who they were up against.
So that set you off on this mission then.
Yeah.
You're with your family, things are going good. You're an advocate for torture. You've got Cage.
Against torture.
Advocate of Shalom.
Hold on, let me tell you those. Once in Guantanamo, MI5 turn up to an interrogation, right? And they bring me a book. And the book is called The English, A Portrait of a People. And it's by Jeremy Paxman, right? So the book, I've still got it to this day. It's stamped, approved by US forces. Many years later, I go on Newsnight and I meet Jeremy Paxman. I said, Mr. Paxman, the Americans the MI5 gave me a copy of your book. Why do you think they gave me a copy of your book of all people? He looks at it, flicks through the pages, and he says, I don't know, Moazzam. But that's evidence of torture right there.
So you met world leaders.
I did, yeah.
Who were the world leaders at that time?
So I've given evidence at a war crimes tribunal in Malaysia, and I met with, at the time, he later became the prime minister, was prime minister before Mahathir Mohamad. I've met with Imran Khan. I've met with the deputy prime minister of Luxembourg, who. So what I was trying to do, meeting some of these people, is to ask them to take Guantanamo prisoners into their country, because some of these guys, if they return home, they're going to get tortured, like the Chinese Uyghurs, like some of the Libyans and the Egyptians and stuff like that. So because you've got this stamp of Guantanamo on your head, you go to some of those countries, they say, well, if America holds you, you must be bad. So back you come into prison and we're going to torture you. So some of these countries, some of these nations, I met with some of the leaders and other people from the foreign ministries, and some of them did take people and some of them didn't.
And then you visited prisoners during the Arab Spring.
Yeah. So during the Arab Spring, I went to Egypt, I went to Tunisia, I went to Libya, and to Syria. All of those places were, I came across prisoners that some had been held for 20 years, 21 years, by Gaddafi, by Mubarak, by Ben Ali, and it was the kind of the Arab Spring, and things were changing. When I went to Syria, it was a bit different, because it didn't have that kind of support from the world at that point, which later, of course, many people got involved afterwards. And I got to know people there, and I was investigating people who'd been renditioned to Syria, because remember I told you that the Americans had threatened to rendition me to Syria. So that was part of my investigation. During the period of time, I got to meet some of the rebels and stuff like that. And when I went back, I sent one of them a generator, and then lo and behold, in February 2014, a raid takes place at my house, and 150 officers are involved. This is now Britain on counter-terrorism on speed. And they searched every single room of my house over the period of 5 days. My kids were taken to different houses, and I was taken to a police station and interrogated for 3 or 4 days, and then taken to a high security prison, Belmarsh, after going to Westminster magistrates.
After all
And
that?
and I remained there in in Belmarsh as a Category A prisoner for 7 months
Holy shit.
in solitary confinement again. Sorry, in an isolated cell. Sorry, not in solitary confinement as I would call it, but in an isolated cell.
On the day of the SWAT team raid, were you like, here we go again?
Yeah, this time round,
history's going to repeat itself.
This time round, I went to my, they didn't bash down the door. They were they were civil. They knew I had a big profile already by this time, so they knew that
They had to be a bit careful. With
they were
you.
a little bit, and so they knocked on the door and they said, "You got a warrant for your arrest and whatever." So I said, "Can you let me speak to my family and please don't cuff me in front of them?" They said, "Yeah." I said, "Let me." So I went to them. They were all sitting in a room together, and I hugged them. I said, "Don't worry, I'll be back soon."
First day in Belmarsh.
Totally. The coppers were trying to frighten me. They said, "This is the most difficult prison in the whole of Britain. It's high security and stuff like that." And I thought, okay. So I thought it's going to be like pretty rough, but I was waiting for all those things to happen that I'd experienced in Guantanamo. None of them did. I was waiting for the full strip search. I was waiting for all of those nasty things that they do, as you know. It never happened. I was waiting to be shackled. Didn't happen. I was waiting for people to scream at me didn't happen. So I was waiting for dogs that never came. So I'm walking along with the prison guard. And 2 guys are walking towards me. And they say, "Hey, Brother Moazzam, salam alaikum." I said, "Wa alaikum salam." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, I'm a prisoner here. He said, "Yeah, we heard about what happened to you." I said, "Where are you guys going?" So we're going to the gym. I said, "You have a gym here?" He said, "Yeah. We're just coming back from visits." I said, "You get visits?" He said, "Yeah, we do. But my mate's just going to make a phone call." I said, "You get phone calls?" So then I said to these guys, I thought, what? Like, do you guys work in the prison? He said, "No, we're prisoners." So I said, "Okay." And then they took me back, to this cell, and then they hand me this sheet. "This is your sheet for your food menu that comes. This is your sheet for your canteen." There's like 500 items on there. Like, wow, I could get used to this. You get phone calls. So it was. I was next to, on either side of my cell where I was in a single cell, and I was in single cell because I'm Cat A, and I'm a Cat A because I'm a terrorism prisoner, and I'm a terrorism prisoner because I sent the generator to Syria. And either side of me are 2 guys who were serving life or 38-year sentences for gangland killings. And the irony is that they thought I was the bad guy. Not as in, I don't make him bad as in bad. I mean, yes, he's a bad boy. This guy shouts on the landing one day, he said, "You know what, guys? You guys are all, fighting in the streets of Britain, but this Moazzam Begg, man, him been in the battlefield, man." So, okay.
So that earned you some kudos.
A little bit, yeah.
Got away with a few things.
A little bit, yeah.
Did anyone target you?
No, never. As we were talking earlier on, the Muslim kind of prison population is strong. It's kind of powerful. I got along with everybody, to be honest with you. My everybody from every background and so forth. I felt my first experience of prison in the UK, and to see people. I was on a wing that's known as House Block 4, where there's mostly drug people on drugs. And I saw a side of Britain that I don't even know about, and you know this probably better, that people's broken lives, institutionalized, and you just thankful that you're not them.
Most prisoners I met had suffered some form of child abuse, sexual abuse, or parents thrown them away as kids, raised on the streets, didn't stand a chance. And I learned the media's like, prisoners are serial killers, rapists, murderers, paedophiles on one side. And then on the other side, the media's like, they've got all these luxuries, blah, blah, blah. So the public hates the prison population. Yeah. But you get in and you see that, yeah, those serious offenders are a minority, but the vast majority of prisoners are society's most vulnerable people. That's what I learned.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's easy to hate people from a distance, right? So you come in their proximity, you sit with them, you're next to them. How are you going to hate somebody that you're in their proximity? You live with them, you see the upside and the bad side and the downside. So it's much harder to do that. And I agree with you that the system, the prison system, it isn't designed to rehabilitate. It's designed in some quirky way to get some kind of retribution. But even that isn't working because, people reoffend.
It seems to me it's designed so politicians can posture being tough on crime while handing all these contracts out to their cronies. The taxpayers, it's like a feeding trough, isn't it? Taxpayers' money. And they all want to get in there with the political contributions.
I'm thinking to myself, I learned that my case and the raid and everything cost over £1 million. How? And in the end, so I was in there for 7 months. The day I was supposed to go to trial, they announced suddenly that we're dropping the case. So I thought, hold on, why? Because the definition of terrorism doesn't really fit sending a generator, or is there something else? And then the chief of Westminster Police actually said, and I quote, Moazzam Begg is an innocent man. So he didn't just say he was found not guilty because we'd dropped the charges, but he's innocent. And I thought, what was the point of this? But what they did, and again, going back to the story of Prophet Joseph, right, is that you just raised my profile again. In my community and amongst other people. Now people see me as somebody as targeted by the state, and the state has exonerated me because it's been forced to. So that's all it did. And so, like, even for my organization as well, in the beginning, people thought, oh, you know what, they're charging him with terrorism. If that's the case, the organization's going to get hammered and stuff like that. And the relief on my colleagues when I was exonerated was, Cage has been vindicated and so forth. But again, you just don't know, as a kind of philosophical thing, you don't know. We as Muslims believe that you don't know necessarily what's good for you, and your Lord, your Creator, knows what's good for you. And that sometimes is part of the test that you're put through so that you can come out the other side in a more powerful way.
I do feel like an invisible hand picked me up from a dangerous lifestyle and put me in somewhere which was helter-skelter, but it forced me to grow up as a person and reevaluate my life and set my life path in a whole new direction I never would have gone on.
Had that prison experience not happened, you wouldn't be here today, right, doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And being involved in educating people and teaching and helping to guide the next generation, right?
Yeah. How much time went from the day you were released from the first incarceration to the arrest on the second incarceration?
9 years.
9 years, okay.
Yeah.
So I got released December 2007, so I'm at about 13 years. So you smile a lot, and as men, we want to not show sometimes
vulnerability.
Yeah. And to go through such an intense experience, even though you said you didn't, feel suicidal or anything like that, and you went through it with a warrior spirit, you must have internalized your trauma. And then 9 years later, there's a repeat to an extent. Did that reopen that wound?
It did in the beginning. So, obviously, I'm saying this is about, this happened, but yeah, in the beginning, the first days, and the worst days, of course, are in the police station. I didn't really talk much about that, but in the first few days in the police station, when you think, what have they got on me? What are they going to do? And so I've always felt the police station always worse than a prison, even though, and here in this case, because all of this effort is being expended on you, like, what the hell have I done to you? Can you tell me one person that is a threat from anything that I have done, past or present? Like, nothing. And I was asking the police officer, I said, is this what you joined the police force for? Do you think you're keeping the streets safe by this? The people I sent a generator to are fighting for their lives. That's all it is. They need electricity so they can eat food and see. So anyway, after all of that, I thought to myself that I'm going to get out of this eventually. I will walk out of this. That anxiety in the beginning, it was, it's destructive. It has physical effects on you. It has effects on your stomach, on your skin, on your brain, and you've got to find your way out of it. And I've got to say, some lawyers are hilarious. I mean, we're sitting and talking, and one of the lawyers, she I'm not going to mention the guy's name, but because I just don't want to out him, but she mentions his name, but instead of saying his name with the word heart, which his name begins with, she says fart. So Sergeant Fart, so-and-so, right? And I'm thinking, I'm fighting for my life, and this lawyer's making me laugh. But it's just those little things sometimes that people say that just take you out of it.
The gallows humor, especially.
Exactly. There you go.
Well, there's any moments during both incarcerations where you just broke down and cried.
Yes.
And what triggered that?
A sense, perhaps not momentary, but a sense of hopelessness.
Thinking it's never going to end.
I mean, genuinely think if I've done something wrong, I'm trying to think, okay, yeah, I have to pay. I got to pay. In life, if you've done something wrong, you're going to have to pay. You're not going to be able to get away with it. As Muslims, we believe even if you get away in this world, you won't in the next. So it's better you pay now than you pay later. So I'm happy with that. But my sense is this targeting of the state targeting you. States, powerful states that are, they're the bastions of freedom, of democracy, of human rights, and they tell the rest of the world that you are backwards because you don't do these things, and yet you guys do that and get away with it. So, when you think about all of this, you think, when is it going to be over? When are they going to stop? When are they going to realize? When is your humanity going to come through?
Yeah, see, I did my ecstasy smuggling, so I had to man up and accept responsibility. But I can't imagine the frustration of being an innocent person and just being in there, and the system, it's Kafkaesque, isn't it? Trying to navigate.
It is, yeah. And I'll tell you this, what makes it kind of easier for me, as I said, I was only there for 3 years. And it's relative. I mean, you were in prison for 6 years, okay, and length of time, you'll never get it back. The people that I know, in fact, one of my closest friends, we lived together in the same house in Afghanistan where we were working on the aid projects. He went into prison for 14 years. He's from London, without charge or trial. And he came home to see kids that are adults.
Wow.
And when I said, my kids didn't know me, they still had some idea, but his kids don't know him at all. Like, he's a stranger in their lives. And this isn't a story that's from, deepest, darkest Africa or Asia. This is from London, Battersea. He's from Battersea. And he was never charged, never convicted, nothing. And when I look at him, and if you think I laugh a lot, the guy will make you laugh like nonstop. I mean, he's full of life. And then I campaign for other prisons, and I talk to them regularly from different parts of the world, Mauritania and Kuwait and Sudan and elsewhere. It's kind of a recurrent theme. No bitterness, no seeking vengeance. Yeah, they're passionate about justice. They want to speak out against what happened. But all of them have made friends with their cards in one way or the other. Wow. I've got to tell you about one guy, right? It's a film called The Mauritanian. It's just come out recently. It's been nominated for 5 BAFTAs. The lawyer's played by Jodie Foster.
Wow. The
prosecutor, as it were, who changes his mind because he turns against Guantanamo, is played by Benedict Cumberbatch. And the lead character is played by Tahir Rahim, who's in a recent BBC publication called The Serpent and The Looming Tower and stuff. So this is about a Mauritanian guy who's in Guantanamo for 14 years without charge or trial. He's tortured. My torture compared with his torture compared with mine is 10 times worse. He's waterboarded, he's beaten, his ribs are broken and stuff like that. He comes back home, right? And one of his close friends now is a guy called Steve, who became his friend in Guantanamo. And he's come to the Mauritanian desert where this guy lives to visit him.
Holy shit.
And he's not full of vengeance and anger. He said, listen, I forgive for anybody who abused me. I forgive them. I've got to move on.
Yeah. Harboring that negative energy just wears you down, doesn't it?
Yeah, it breaks you.
It's pointless.
Yeah.
But it's hard to have that mindset for some people. So going into the UK system then, did you draw on the skill set of your first incarceration Did you like go back to doing your exercises and your reading or whatever?
I did, but there was so much more available. I mean, I had a TV in myself, for goodness sake. Do you know what I mean? And I had a TV, but you couldn't have a remote control, so I had to get up to change every time, which is like, it takes you back to the 80s. But I managed to negotiate with one of the guys on the server. I said, can you sneak me in a remote control? He said, yeah, if you give me some incense sticks. I said, yeah, I can trade you that for this. He said, just make sure nobody, because my cell used to get, as a category A prisoner, my cell gets searched regularly. So that's different between me and the other prisoners. But I managed to hide it in a place where, I had a good few months of...
UK Cat A prison food versus Gitmo prison food.
Gosh, there's not much in it. There's not much. I mean, Gitmo prison food was pretty horrible. Prison food here was maybe a grade higher. I'd say a grade higher, probably.
Was there a lot more noise then in the UK prison system? Did that disturb you? Did it were you trying to sleep through
people
things?
hitting the cell doors and smacking them all the time? Guantanamo wasn't really not like that for me because I was in solitary most of the time anyway. But yeah, there was a lot of noise. A lot of noise.
Did you witness any violence or guard brutality in the UK?
Yeah, I did. I saw people fight. I saw fights. I saw somebody try to hang himself in the cell next to me, and I alerted the guards to open the door to get him out. And so he tied a noose around his neck, and he'd try to kill himself. I found it sadder. I found this. We were political prisoners. Guantanamo was political prisoners. Even if we weren't political activists necessarily, we were held for political reasons. This was just broken lives, man. It was just horrible.
Could you have visits in Cat A?
Yeah, I did get some visits. Yeah. We're different, though, to the Cat A prisoners. They wear an orange bib when they go out, as opposed to the yellow ones. But, we did get them. There would be more searches for us. There'd be a bit more security. But the one good thing is that you'd have your own cell. Yeah,
there's nothing like your own cell, is there?
No.
I played the system to the end of it when I was in minimum security, where I got my own cell for quite a period of months, and that was just...
I'd actually say that, I'd trade any day. I would trade, whether being Cat A or Cat B, for having my not give up. I would not give up my single cell.
And to put this in a context for the public to understand, think about your house, think about the toilet, the room with the toilet in. Imagine living in that room, the toilet room, with 2 or 3 other people and having to go on the toilet in front of them and everything and sleep around them. And
I can't tell you this, Shaun, that what you've just said right now, nobody will know that unless they've experienced it, right?
Yeah.
Nobody will. You can't know what that means, that degradation, and that, how do you live in that? And, I thank God that I never lived in that, even though I was in Belmarsh. Though people in cells opposite me were in that situation. I think, how do you guys do that?
So you're in Cat A the whole time?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
And then what was your release day like coming out?
There was a video link in which they announced, I've been preparing for my trial, I was ready to go to battle for this. I'm going to show this is not terrorism. I'm going to show how the British government has sent over 1,000 generators to the same Free Syrian Army. I'm politically charged on this. And then they just pulled the plug. They threw in the towel before the fight. So I was really upset in a way.
You wanted to go to war.
I said, you know what? You guys have put me in prison so many times. Bagram, Kandahar, Guantanamo, Belmarsh. Let's go there. Come on, let's go to battle. And they gave up. They threw in the towel. So I was a bit upset, but of course happy. I walked out and there's a whole bunch of media people out there. Mr. Begg, what do you think this is all about? And is this, what do you think about the government, etc., and all that stuff? And I just smiled and got into the car with my lawyer. And this time we went, I can't remember where we went off from here. Went somewhere.
Not piles of junk food.
Yeah, I can't actually remember where we went straight away, but I think somebody picked me up, and my brother or somebody, and drove me back home. And there were massive protests taking place for me. Like thousands of people turned up to protest outside the Home Office and the Met Police Office and stuff. So there was a movement going on. People felt that I was being targeted. But it was, again, as I said, sometimes your enemies can do for you what you couldn't do yourself.
Was your decompression from that incarceration much less intense than the first time around.
Yes. I'd come home, of course. A lot of my stuff had been seized from my house. So there were computers and stuff that I'd collected and whatever. That came back eventually. They did bring it back in strange. The police had boxed it up all nicely and thought, wow, that's better condition than when I sent. There were restrictions on me. For a period of time, if somebody bought me a coffee, they could be guilty of a terrorist offense. So those restrictions lasted. My passport had been confiscated. My bank accounts kept getting closed, one after the other. One account I had for 25 years. And so there were residual effects of all of this, and they remain with me to this day. There are still those effects. Even though, as I said, the police had declared me innocent, being declared innocent by the police doesn't mean you're going to get treated like an innocent guy. And that's, getting back to this thing of the Islamophobia, the racism, that forget the neo-Nazi on the street, which I used to fight on, when I was a kid. This is at state level. This is Boris Johnson saying Muslim women who wear the niqab look like bank robbers. This is like, Baroness Warsi saying that Islamophobia has passed the dinner table test. This is, Schedule 7 laws where you stopped at an airport and are 42 times more likely to be stopped if you're a Muslim. This is the passing of a new anti-terror law every year that targets people, whether they've written poetry or whether the kid goes to school and mispronounces a word that sounds like cooker-bomb, but actually is cucumber, and he ends up referred to terrorism officers. And this is happening to the Muslim community.
We'll get to more of the politics in a second. Did the second incarceration then take less of a toll on your wife and kids? Or were they like just, fuck, this is happening all over again? It's made it even worse?
My kids were kind of mostly, there's 4 of them, and there were 2 years between all of them.
Yeah.
So they were all kind of mid to late teenagers. And they were getting that age when they're getting active and aware of the world and stuff. So it politicized them. They started to see things that they probably, before when I used to go to do talks and lectures and stuff like that, I was just doing a boring old talk. This time around, they were interested.
Yeah. This
time around, they felt it themselves. They were old enough to remember the raid, and they didn't like it. It did have consequences. Of course, it had consequences on my family.
And what year was it you got out of Belmarsh?
2014.
2014. So was Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy at that point?
Yeah. So I had met Julian 2011. He did an interview with me on his Russia Today program, where we spoke about different aspects, different things. And I'd met Julian a couple of times as well, because we have the same lawyer. And I'd met Julian and spoken to him about various aspects of what his own thing was. He, at the time himself, he was wearing a tag. So when he did an interview with me, he was wearing a tag, and was concerned that the Americans were going to try to take him over. And the Americans, of course, they regarded him as an enemy of the state. And they regarded him as an enemy of the state because he was, leaking things that they should have investigated themselves. The massacres that took place in Iraq, the Guantanamo files, the fact that torture was taking place in the America. So much of this hidden stuff that he leaked, which in any society that says everybody's equal under the law should have already looked into. But they were covering it up and hiding it under the carpet. And he uncovered it and has been targeted for it.
And his journalism has been 100% accurate.
Yeah.
And to people who watch this channel then, so I sent Julian a copy of Hard Time actually when he was in the embassy, and had a brief communication with him, tried to rally some support. They put that sex offender jacket on him, which is absurd. And now he's where you were.
What's really weird is that some of the people from Julian's team came over to ask me about some practical steps of how do you survive in Belmarsh, right? So I gave him some points and stuff like that. But to say that, Julian is in a worse place in Belmarsh than I was in, and he's isolated, he's kept away from people, and the prospect looming over your head of being sent to America and then being treated, you would be treated like a political prisoner in the way that America treats its political prisoners, which cannot bode well for him. It will mean solitary confinement. It will mean being in places where you'll get tortured and abused and probably targeted by other prisoners, which I'm sure you can speak to, better than I can.
Yeah, the viewers are constantly reaching out. Anytime I post something about Assange, asking, what can they do? What can people do to help and support him?
Well, I think it's important that people, the concept of, we are as a country and a world where we are because of, much to do with the Iraq War. There's still been no accountability for that. Millions of people have died as a result. ISIS has come about as a result of that. As a result of ISIS, we've got laws in this country, the likes of which we never even had at the height of the IRA campaign, right? It's crazy. So when will there be any accountability? And if there's anything Julian Assange has done, is being targeted for, it's to ask those questions, put that information out, say, listen, this is what was done. This is what's been covered up. Why does it take somebody like that to show us what we should be doing in the first place? So ask your MPs, go to your politicians and say, what are you doing about Assange's case? That it is, write to him, and you can get his details, I think, on, if you just do a search on Assange and try and think where you can find that.
Yeah, because mail is like gold in prison.
Yeah, you can email. You could actually go to emailaprisoner.com and you can search a person's prison number and should be able to email them as well. So I remember I used to get emails from people. You don't actually get the email itself; it's just printed out as a sheet. Yeah.
So, is there an organisation at the spearhead of helping him? We could put a link in this below the video.
Yeah, I
for
think
Julian.
there is. I think it's the hashtag is Free Assange.
Free Assange.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember what the website's for. I forget now. But if you do a search, you will find it.
What's the status of his mental and physical health these days?
It's not been good. It's not been good at all, from my knowledge. He has, bouts of depression, and rightly so. As I said, from my knowledge, he is isolated from other prisoners. Not because he poses a threat or they pose a threat to him. I think they're probably worried about the influence he may have on anybody else. And when you do that to somebody for no fault of his own, then that's going to have a debilitating effect. It's going to destroy your mind.
Yeah, so let's support Julian. This is a guy who has sacrificed his life for the truth. And we've seen in the pictures and videos of his, physical deterioration. And the Americans, I'm not saying the American people, I'm saying forces in the American government, absolute cowards, have utilized him in certain ways, but now, have never said, okay, we're going to exonerate you or, give you a pass somehow. We're going to let you off the hook. They're still pushing for him to go over there, aren't they?
It's shocking. After everything that's happened, Julian Assange in a normal world would have been somebody that's prized, that's given awards, that's recognized for his contribution and sacrifice. But in the world that we live in today, he's somebody that's targeted and by the very state that's supposed to be, honoring him. It's really, really unfortunate.
So this war on terror stuff, then, is it just endless government spending at our expense? Is that what it's all about? Just let's keep it going, like all well predicted.
Listen, war on terrorism, anti-extremism, or whatever you want to call that, is an industry. They are think tanks that receive millions of pounds and push the various agendas all around the world and say, we are the experts in this. And they go to other lesser advanced countries and say, look, this is the program that we've built. We can sell it to you. And so it's a business. And it's a business here. It's a business abroad. It's a business in America. It's a business in Saudi Arabia. It's a business everywhere. The more you can send this message off, that we have a massive threat of terrorism and extremism. Okay, there is a threat of terrorism, but there's also a threat of being hit by cars. Get it into context, get it relative. And so there's, as we pointed out, there are a lot of people stand to make a lot of money from this and are profiteering from other people's misery. And the war on terror is that.
But thanks to people like you raising awareness, getting people's minds changed to the reality of how the world really works, hopefully enough people, there'll be a tipping point in society at some point. Because it's happened with the war on drugs. I think there's a tipping point in society now where all that's getting reversed.
I believe so. I believe it will, because there's lots of things that are joining in now. There's the arts, there's the film world, there's the book world, the literary world. All of these places, indeed academia and elsewhere, where people are making a pushback and challenging the statistics, challenging the figures, challenging the success rates of all of these various programs, counterterrorism programs, counter-extremism, prevent, and all of this stuff, and asking the real question: are we safer now than when you began these laws and wars on terror 20 years ago? If not, will you accept that everything that you have done has been a failure? And if it's a failure, what about your cost-effective management and looking at this, just as a business model? Like, you failed and failed and failed and failed and made the world worse. You started off with Al-Qaeda, a small organization, and you come up with an organization called ISIS, which has like tens of thousands joining it and globally How is that success? How come everything that you have done made it worse? So just from a business model and say, tell the people where all their money has gone and what you spent it on. So, of course, that's not happening, is that they're not going to do that. So it's up to people like us to make others ask those questions of people in power.
And so many parallels with the war on drugs. America spent $2 trillion on a war on drugs, and there's more drugs available than ever before anywhere in the world. It's everywhere, even in supermax prisons, highest concentrate levels, more people in prison than ever before. Fentanyl is out there, legal highs. 2 trillion. When you see the words war on, think war on taxpayers' wallets, Halliburton, contracts, private prisons. Oh man, it makes me.
When I was in Belmarsh, they put me onto a block where there's mostly people affected by drugs, either taking drugs or dealing drugs and so forth. So you can see that it's like a pandemic here in Britain. It's massive, and I only know that just from that short experience there, let alone what's going on elsewhere.
Yeah, Moazzam, you've come on and absolutely mind-blowing what you've been through, and I'm sure the audience are as gripped as I am right now. I could speak to you all day. How can we support you, the people watching this? All your links will be in the description box.
Yeah, so I work for an organization called CAGE, as I said earlier on, that we campaign against Guantanamo and the war on terrorism in general. You can go to cage.ngo and see our work there. You can follow us on with Cage on Instagram, on UK Cage, at UK Cage on Twitter, and on Facebook, just Cage. And my own stuff is again, Moazzam Begg. You can just do a search on it on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. It's the same name. So
if people want to send you a message, do you have a preferred platform that you're most active on?
Any one of them will do. Twitter or Facebook, or anyone will do.
Okay. So there you have it. All the links are going to be in the description box. Really hope you've enjoyed this. Would love to get on possibly some of the other people you've mentioned today. The guy who smiles more than you, perhaps. So yeah, let us know in the comments what you thought. Huge thank you to all the new subscribers. Subscription logos in the bottom corner of the screen. And huge thank you to people who've gone down into the description box and supported all of our links. They're all right down there. So before we conclude, I'll show you the Arizona prison handshake. So that's that.
Yeah.
And then that. And then when you bump fist. Yeah. Do you want to give us a hug?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cheers, man. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
It's been really, really amazing.